At INdigital, we know the public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESInet goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at INdigital.net.
Carbyne, it's multimedia. You can get text, translate to whatever language, getting away with the legacy equipment and going into a cloud-based solution.
It's the first time in U.S. history that we have an ESInet through cloud-native call handling.
As a police officer, to have the victim go video, that's unheard of.
You're getting upgrades every month, not every year.
To schedule your free Carbyne demo, please visit carbyne.com/WTT.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned. Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be episode 471, Within the Trenches, True Stories from the 911 Dispatchers Who Live Them. This episode is sponsored by INdigital as well as Carbyne, and a big shout out to patrons, as always, for everything. I just wanted to jump in here really quick. This episode is going to be an Imagine Listening episode, episode 471 as well as 472. 472 will be the open mic portion of Imagine Listening, but this comes from the New Jersey NENA conference that I was at a few weeks ago, which was an amazing experience. I hope I get a chance to go back. And it was powerful. I mean, I know I say it a lot with every session, but this was the first time that it was ever done in at the New Jersey conference, and it was just story after story people wanted to share, and it was just an amazing moment to be in there with all of you. So thank you all for sharing your stories. There are a couple that were written and submitted in that I did record, so they will definitely be in this episode. So without further ado, here's episode 471, Imagine Listening, that was recorded at the New Jersey NENA conference. Imagine watching your son take off on his four-wheeler. You've witnessed this many times. He rides, he has fun, and all is well. Now imagine you're 911, taking a call from frantic parents who have just found their son underneath his flipped four-wheeler. You listen to the parents scream while they remove it off his body. You tell them that help is on the way, and you give them CPR instructions. An officer arrives, and you listen as he performs CPR. "Come on, buddy," is what you hear over the phone. This is what it's like within the trenches. In this episode, you'll hear stories from the I Am 911 movement, a movement I started to fight the reclassification of dispatchers from clerical to protective and bring awareness to the types of calls the 911 dispatchers answer on a daily basis. This is an Imagine Listening session, and we are here together at the 2022 New Jersey NENA Conference. Now, you heard the warning at the beginning, but I must warn you again and add that if you suffer from PTSD or have suicidal tendencies, you are listening at your own risk. The stories you're about to hear are all true and come from the dispatchers who live them. While some stories have a good outcome, the majority are horrifying. This is our reality. Your worst day is our everyday. So let's start with a bang. I want you to imagine each story. Become the dispatcher who has taken each call and Imagine listening. So that story in the beginning is a real story. That's actually my story. It's a story that started out the movement, and the movement said, or that story rather said, I heard your last breath the night you flipped your four-wheeler. Hashtag I am 911. Now, a few days later, I'm watching Stranger Things. The show very first came out, so spoiler alert if you haven't watched it. One of the episodes, the sheriff finds this kid who's been missing pretty much the whole season. And he's on his back and he's there with his mom. And he's performing CPR. And I lost it. Emotionally lost it. Was crying. I had no idea why at first. Then I realized the story that I had put out there that was all over social media right now, I was now watching exactly what I was listening to. Because in that episode, that sheriff is also saying, come on, buddy. Come on. There's the triggers that happen. But I share these stories because it's easier to manage. And a lot of people who have shared theirs, they feel the same way. So who has a story that they would like to share?
I'll just start with the story. No introductions. It was early in my 911 dispatching career that I received a call from a Indian gentleman. And what called sounded to me that he said my wife was drunk. And it didn't make sense. So I asked him again. So then he reiterated it, and he said his wife has drowned. And I said, where is your wife? She's in the bathtub. So far, I'm still not 100% convinced of the reality of the story. So I give instructions, you got to get her out of the tub onto the floor. You know, as the cards read. We weren't using ProQA at the time. We were using just regular flip cards, the state flip cards. And I heard the water splashing. And I was like, this is real. So I started giving, once he got her out of the water, I started giving him CPR. This is condensed, by the way. CPR instructions. And every time, I tell him compressions and the breath. And every time he gave her a breath, he would cry. And went on for about, a couple of minutes. It seems like an eternity to your hoot, but it's only on a few minutes while he was doing that. And talking him through it. Like I said, this is my first CPR on a phone. It's early on. And finally, the EMS got there and took over. I hung up, looked at my partner, stood up, and said, I got to go for a walk. I took a walk, around the hallways a little while just to clear my head. Unfortunately, I found out later, and she was pregnant. That's what happened. Sorry, just popped in my head. I don't remember what I did for lunch yesterday. Popped in my head. What was? She was pregnant. I don't know, a couple, maybe 6 months pregnant. And what they think happened, obviously I never heard the end result, other than she didn't make it. The fetus in her did not make it, but she had a seizure, which does happen, pregnant females like there's others. And she had the seizure and went under. So that again, I never really heard the story as to what happened, because that was just what they were figuring at the time. But that was probably, that sticks in my head so clearly, because that's my first one, that one day. And I mean, I've done CPR over the phone hundreds of times since, but that was the one that sticks in my head. And that's the story.
Thank you.
So it's a midnight shift. I'm sitting there, we're doing 1 million traffic stops. We stopped everything and anything that moved in town. We stopped it. Sitting there, and I get a 911 call. The guy on the other end says, sounds like maybe like a 13, 14-year-old kid. I don't know, didn't know him. He says, I'm looking for help. I said, what kind of help you looking for? he says, I'm just not right. I don't feel right. I'm trying to get to this, what we call the Carrier Clinic up in Hillsborough, New Jersey. And at that time I was working, we were probably about 20 miles away from there. I said to him, I'm going to get you help. Let me send someone. I'm going to come out there and we're going to help you. All I hear is the horn of a train. And then I hear the swinging of the headset, because it was a pay phone. That's how old this story is. Swinging, and you heard his body literally explode on the front of that train. And we picked him up from where I worked to the next town, 2 miles away, before the train stopped. And I've always lived with that I guess me saying, I'm going to get you help just wasn't enough. And I still today, it goes for us as well in the comm center that we always have to take care of each other. He turned out to be 18 years old, he literally got dumped off the train by the conductors because he didn't pay his fare. And he ended up at our train station, and we were going to send him help. We would drive him to, at that time would probably be Princeton House because it's the closest to our town. But it's those things that you deal with that, we do need to take care of ourselves. And that's where it changed for me, is to take care of my own mental health, because that really, as much as I didn't know the kid, it affected me, because I did want to help him and I did want to ultimately see him, succeed in whatever he wanted to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a story?
All right, so as many of you know, I had spent a career with the Gloucester County Emergency Response Center and recently retired after close to 26 years of employment. But during that tenure, I had an opportunity to train and educate a lot of public safety telecommunicators and 911 dispatchers that were getting into the profession and never knew about what we did. So my traditional morning would normally start out with the group in the audience, and I would ask them certain questions of what in life experiences have you done to prepare yourself for what it is that you're about to encounter. Multiple car stops, people dialing 911 to report their houses are on fire, things of that nature. I said, but I honestly want to ask you all a question. In 1997, a year after I started with our agency, and almost 13 years prior to that being a street-level BLS provider as an EMT, nothing prepared me in the agency that I worked for to take the phone call from the mother of a 17-year-old that just blew her head off with a shotgun. So as a brand new communication officer, less than a year on the job, I take that phone call. Knowing what Mom is describing to me on the other end of the phone, I knew there wasn't the best hands-on CPR in the world that was going to help this child. So of the thousands upon thousands of 911 phone calls that we've all taken in our careers, I typically start my morning out with those trainees asking that question to let them know, because again, nothing prepared me to take that call. Not my 11 or 12 years of street EMS experience dealing with dead bodies and, the mayhem and the trauma that we deal with in that avenue and that aspect. But for me, that's a call that still resonates with me almost on a daily basis. I think about it, and when we talk about secondary and tertiary patient syndrome in the EMD program, that tertiary thing is what happens to you. And for the next 3-4 nights after I took that 911 phone call, I had vivid visual dreams that I woke up out of a sound sleep, imagining a female wrapped in plastic on a metal table. And I associated that with the morgue. I associated it with, the end result. But I believe what drew my connection to that mother as a parent, I had a child that was around the same age. So I was tertiary to that 911 call, and how could I help this woman on the other end when that phone call was made? And all that was said to me after the phone call was done by my supervisor was, you did well, go out back, grab a cup of coffee and a cigarette. That was the briefing that was done back during that period of time. All right, some of you have heard me, talk over the course of the last couple of days about the importance of being able to help yourself. We've got to look out for each other in this profession because no one else is going to do it for us. So if you need to reach out, if you need to have a conversation with someone, and again, 85, I don't want to sound, demoralizing, but 85-year-old grandmothers who've taken their final breath inside a nursing home, I'll take those phone calls all day long. But the ones that pose that significant trauma and the ones that deal with, you question yourself going, why does this happen? And I took that phone call, and then, 26 years later, it still sticks with me day in and day out. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Thanks.
Thank you. Ring, ring. 911. Where's your emergency? Please tell my mom I'm sorry. Where are you? Please tell my girlfriend I loved her. Somehow, I got his address, and we start police. He continues to tell me that his girlfriend cheated on him with his best friend, and continues how he has nothing to live for. Please tell my mom I'm sorry. I talk to him, telling him that he can tell her himself and that things will work out. He says, "Thank you for not leaving me alone." I tell him I'll stay with him. He says, "That's okay. There's nothing to live for now. I'm sorry I took up your time. Thank you for not leaving me alone. Goodbye." As the mother entered the attic where he was, he hung himself. He was 16. Straight A student, star athlete, good family. He thought his world was over because of what was happening with his friend and girlfriend, so he ended it. Every day, I look at my now 13-year-old son and tell him nothing is that bad. Even if it seems horrible, it will pass. Every day, I worry that one day my son may think that someone in the moment is something life-ending. I'm scared every day. I am 911.
So I'm actually going to give you two stories, but they all kind of tie to Ricardo at the end. But so my first story, I was a baby dispatcher a million years ago. I won't tell you how long ago that was because then I'll give away my age. And I received a phone call from the world's smallest little voice. A little boy was calling me, and he just simply says to me, "My brother's suffocating." And I was like, mid-morning, expect nothing's going on, sit up in my chair, and I was like, "What do you mean? What do you mean he's suffocating?" And he's like, he's suffocating. And I said, "Okay, I need you to help me understand what you're trying to tell me. Is he breathing?" And he's like, "No, I don't think so." And I hear sobbing, just extreme sobbing in the background. And I'm kind of like, okay, what's happening? Who are you? How old are you, honey? He's like, "I'm 7. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, "Is your mommy there? What's going on?" And all of a sudden I hear the sobs and I hear, "Who are you calling? Who are you calling?" He's like, "Mommy, I called 911. I was trying to help." And she picks the phone, and through sobs, extreme sobs, I managed to pull out, "He's dead." And I'm like, "Ma'am, who's dead? Can you tell me what's going on? Who's dead?" "He's dead, he's dead, he's dead." And I'm like, "Okay, tell me what's going on." And she said, "He's dead. He strangled himself." I'm like, "On what?" And she's like, "He's only 4. He's only 4. And that's all she keeps saying. And I'm like, "Okay, do you want to begin CPR?" So now I'm like, I can't get to the details of what's happening. "Do you want to begin CPR?" She's like, "It's too late. It's too late. He's stiff." And I said, "Okay, do you still want to continue? Do you still want to try?" And she's like, "I know he's dead. He was trying to get into bed with his brother, and he slipped and fell, and he fell in between the bunk bed." So at this point, I know that it's been hours. because it is now, later in the morning. My shift has started. We started at 7. It's probably 7:38. Sometime overnight, this little boy was trying to crawl into the upper bunk with his brother. He slipped and fell, and his head fell between the 2 rungs of a bunk bed. And he was not found until hours later. So this poor little boy spent that evening probably struggling, and nobody knew. My debriefing on that was, my partner had decided to go out to get breakfast and not return for an hour. I'm sure we've all had those partners. And my debriefing on it was, my lieutenant swings open the door and he goes, "You good?" And I was new, and I was like, yeah, I'm okay. So that's, you hold on to that. Fast forward a few years later, and I get a phone call, and there's this woman. She is just screaming. And again, it's, "He's dead, he's dead, he's dead." All I got, immediately triggering and bringing me right back to that first call where I am listening to this poor child say the same thing. But this is a young woman. When I look at the alley screen, I decide that I know who this caller is, and we have significant problems, significant family history there, significant issues that go on at this particular house. And it turns out her boyfriend had hung himself, and she's on a pretty main road in our jurisdiction at the time. And what's happening is people are walking by and people are driving by, and she's in the driveway. She found him in the garage, and she is screaming that he is dead, and then she's screaming at people, "Stop looking! Stop looking!" It's traumatic, and I'm trying to get her to focus on me to try and get him down, because we don't know how long this is. I need you to try and get him down from where he is. I need you to start CPR. And she's just obliterated. And this is years after that first call, and I go home, come back, and one day I'm walking into the door of my department, and I'm just staring. And internally, I'm like, this just can't be it. This just can't be everything there is to this job, where I'm in everybody's suck. And I'm tired of being in everybody's suck. And I'm tired of being yelled at by the people on the road, the first responders, because they also give us their suck. And correct, because they suck. So I'm pregnant. It's years later, I'm pregnant, and this last one had happened probably 30 days before that, and I get a phone call from one of my partners at work, and all she says to me is, "Stevie's dead." And I said, "What do you mean she's dead?" She's like, "She's dead. She hung herself." And I hung up and I sat down. I was actually one of my days off, and still getting good news on my days off. And I sit down and I think about it for a second, and Stevie is the girl who called me that day, and she was screaming. Again, this is somebody that we knew, somebody that we had dealt with all the time, significant family history. We have constant issues with them. And she decided to take her own life. And the only thing I could think about was, what did I do to not help her? What did I do to not convince her that I was there with her in the moment when she discovered her boyfriend dead? What did I do to create her to decide to take her own life that day? So a few weeks go by, and I find Imagine Listening, and I decide to watch it. And I post it to my Facebook page because I felt that it was important, because I finally realized that I'm not the only one that feels this way, that I'm not constantly stuck in this suck and worried about my life in this suck. And there's people out there, and our 911 field is expansive. There are people everywhere that are experiencing these same things, but yet I'm just a dispatcher, and I need to stay in my lane, and I need to stop speaking, and I need to stop thinking that my job is not that important. But I have this beautiful footage that is on my Facebook, and it's scrolling through all of these terrible calls, because these are calls secretaries take. These aren't calls that administrative people are accepting. These are calls that we're accepting as 911 operators. And that day, I actually, after watching it, I excused myself and went to the bathroom and collapsed in the bathroom and cried for the first time in my career. It was damn near 12 years later, after all of these events and calls, and I'm now in the bathroom finally crying about the Stevies of the world, about the little boy of the world. And again, I've been in EMS for now 26 years. And so I've seen some shit. Like, let's be serious. I've seen some shit in my career, and I could go on all day to tell you about all my shit that I have seen. But those two calls were very significant because they were very similar and they were triggers. And I had a police officer who gets on my page and he's like, would you shut the fuck up? He's like, your job's not that bad, after I posted this on Facebook. And that's when I started driving this I Am 911 movement, because that we're not that secretary, we're not that administrative assistant that started in the 50s, and that's not how this is anymore. And these are the things, the very real life things. So just recently, I haven't shared this with you, but just recently, I've sent my child to private school. Many reasons out there, and I'm sure you all understand them. So I sent my child to private school, and he was getting ready to receive his communion. We had to go to church, and the deacon that's in the church is the father of the little boy that was in that bunk bed that evening. He has no idea that I know who he is and that I am directly connected to his life that day, and that I think about his family every single day of my life and of my existence. And there he is in the church as the deacon, accepting God's good graces despite what he's just experienced. And he has no idea that I listened to his little boy tell me that his brother had suffocated. And while I sit in church and I watch him up there, and I know that he's been able to forgive God for what happened and understand that there was a path and a reason for that, I believe that there's a path and a reason for all of us who physically sit in our spaces, and that we shouldn't give up the fighting for Jim Lockerby's fight to get our for Ricardo's fight to make sure that we all are heard and everybody listens to us. It's powerful what we do, and we touch lives, and we carry those callers with us for years, and we will continue to carry those people with us. And we pass people in the street every day that we've probably helped at some point. And I think it's just really important that we continue to sit in this space together and walk those walks and get to Washington and call your senators and let people know, because we're important, and we are the most important facet, because while that caller is experiencing whatever it is that they've gone through, we're in that moment with them. We're in that moment of discovery. We're not 4 minutes later, 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later in some places when first response is on scene. We're there. So, thank you.
"911 was the address of your emergency." It's something that I say with every call. This time, the caller, a woman, screaming. I can make out certain words, the rest is unintelligible. I hear, "It, my baby," more screaming, more words that I can't understand. "It, my baby. It ate my baby." "What ate your baby?" "Bear." "Ma'am, a bear ate your baby?" During this time, police and EMS are already dispatched to the address. My caller, she continues to scream, "No bear. Please help me." "Ma'am, how old is your baby?" She continues to scream, 2 weeks. "Ma'am, where is the bear?" "In the living room." "Ma'am, you have a bear in your living room?" No. Please help." "No. My dog's name is Bear." The responders are updated. "Your dog ate your baby?" "Yes. We laid her down on the floor. We grabbed her by the head and slammed her around." "Please get here. My husband is going to kill the dog." "Ma'am, help is already on the way." Medical instructions were given, attempted, but was essentially useless because the mom was hysterical, and rightfully so. And the husband, well, the husband was focused on the dog. In the end, the baby died on scene. And it was the family dog, Bear, that did it. It's believed that the baby on the floor was doing what newborns do and was making noises that the dog associated with squeaky toys. I am 911.
I started off night shift, 6 to 5 in the morning. And one night I was at work, normal night at work. I think it was a football game or something that night. And my daughter and her friends, they went to go hang out at the football game. They walk home. They come past our police department and go to their houses. And it was 3 of us working. One of them went to lunch, so it was only 2 at the time. And we started getting these phone calls in saying that they believe somebody was shot. And I heard my supervisor at the same time saying they were shot in the head. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, what does she have? I'm trying to listen to what she had and listen to what I had at the same time. And I said, my caller, I answered 911. They said, yeah, there's a female. She's shot in the head. She's laying in the bushes. There's another girl with her and she's hiding. So I said, oh my God. I was like, where's this at? And it was down the block from my job. So the first thing in my head is, where's my daughter? She was walking from the football game, and all the girls said they were in a big group. They were walking together. So I'm like, I can't text my daughter because I'm on the phone. Got to answer these 911 calls. They're coming in like crazy now. So the guy was like, well, the girl's hiding in the bushes. Cops got on scene. Didn't have any names yet. So I got a little second in between, and I said, Bree, where are you? And she said, I just got home. And I said, okay, where's all the other girls that you were with? And she's like, oh, well, they're still walking home. And I go, all right. She's like, why, what's wrong? And I'm like, we can't say anything about what's going on because this is where we work. And I said, nothing, everything's fine. I just wanted to make sure you were home. She was like, all right. I said, just check the other girls, make sure everybody got home safe. She said, okay. So I'm sitting here where, cops are going there or whatever. And I'm sitting there and they gave one of the names to the females. So I said, oh, I don't know who that is. So good. Thank God it's none of the girls that I know. Not that I wish this on anybody. But it was the girl that was hiding in the bushes. So I still didn't have the name for the girl and the one that was laying that got shot. So I sat there and I'm sitting there. So one of the detectives at the time, he was an officer, calls me and he's like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you sitting at the console? And I said, what do you mean? He was like, did you get the names of the females that just came in? And I said, yeah. I said, I don't know who that girl is. He goes, Kim, did you get the other name? And I said, no. I said, why? And now I started shaking because I'm like, why is he saying this to me? He's like, Kim, it's Amber. And I said, what? And he was like, it's Amber. My daughter was just walking with her. They all went to high school together. I said, Amber's the one that was hiding in the bushes? And he was like, no, Kim, Amber's the one that was shot in the head. So I sat there, and I didn't know what to do because it was just me and my supervisor. It's not like I could just get up and leave. Couldn't do anything because we still had the calls coming in, MVAs, chest pains, everything else. And I'm sitting there, and I'm shaking, and my supervisor, she got up. She was like, what's wrong? I said, it was one of my daughter's friends. And she was like, oh, my God. So we're sitting there, and while I'm sitting there, I started feeling like I had to throw up. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, I can't leave work. Now, guess what's happening? My daughter's calling me. Her friends are texting me. Aunt Kim, was that Amber? Was it Amber? Because, everything hits the streets, the kids talk. And I can't answer them because where I work again, we can't tell what's going on. And I'm like, girls, I said, I don't know. So the fact of me knowing, the fact of me lying to my daughter and her friends now kind of affected me because I'm like, now I got to lie to these girls and tell them that I don't know if it's their friend and I know it's their friend dead. I didn't know what to do. I felt lost. I felt helpless. And my daughter kept texting me, Mommy, please tell me. Mommy, please tell me. And I'm like, Bree, I don't know. She's like, I know you know. And I'm like, Mom, I can't tell you anything. I don't know anything yet. I don't know. They didn't give us names. I kept lying. So the officer that called me on the phone at the time, he was so mad. He came in and he goes, why the hell is she still sitting at this console right now? So he said, Kim, just get up. He said, just get up. Go to the bathroom. He said, I'll sit here. If I got to answer the phone, whatever it is. And I ran to the bathroom. I just threw up. And I came back and I said, I got to finish working. I don't know what to do. I got to finish work. It's only 2 of us. I can't leave. None of the bosses came in. As you said, you good? And I sat there and he was like, no. So he went down to the desk. He said, you need to get somebody in here. She needs to leave. She needs to get to her daughter. She needs to get to her daughter's friends. Because they were all saying they wanted to walk to my job to meet me. And I was like, no, stay home. Now the anger was kicking in with my daughter. No, we need to find who did this. And they were all panicking. They were crying on the phone, calling me. And I was like, he just said she needs to leave. So finally, the girl that was on lunch, she came back. And the boss was like, well, there's only 3 of you. I have to get in touch with your boss to see if, you could leave. And I'm sitting there like, I'm still answering calls. I was crying. I was still answering calls and everything. And the other officer came back in again. He goes, I got them to let you leave. You're leaving. You're not staying here anymore. So I said, okay, and then I left. And of course, me, the normal person I always was at work, I was like, I can't leave them. Now they're going to be stuck here, till 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning because of me leaving. And they looked at me and they're like, really? Kim, just go. And that was my dispatchers. Kim, just go. We understand. And I went home with my daughter. And the crazy part is the next day, like you said, I never got Kim, you need to talk to anybody. Kim, we're going to have a debriefing on this. Nothing. I went to work the next day. Like nothing happened. And like you said, you live with this stuff. And it's like then you go to work and then you take another call. And I grew up in the town. So all the kids that any incident ever happened after that affected me more because I watched these kids grow up since they were little. And then to get phone calls and to hear, and she was a beautiful girl. It was all over the news. She was actually going to be a police officer. She went to the cadet that summer and she passed it. And they actually gave her an award for it because she wanted to be a police officer. So, and they still haven't found her murderer yet either. But it was a hard thing because we have such an important job and people don't acknowledge it. They don't hear the emotions that we deal with and the deaths that we deal with on a daily basis and then go home and deal with our regular lives and how much it affects us that you need to talk to somebody, whether it's a friend, if it's your EAP program or anything. Please talk to somebody because if not, it builds up and builds up and then one day it could be us. And then we're on that phone saying that we want to commit suicide or not even tell anybody because we've dealt with things for so long. But that was my experience.
All of you have been seeing me walking around with this bowling ball, right? So some of you kind of know the backstory, some of you don't. I kind of figured I should come clean to some of you because I'm not completely nuts, although my therapist says otherwise. He's my Wilson. He is how I relieve my PTSD from being the primary caregiver for my mother for 11 years when she battled dementia. What I learned after a few years of it was my job helped me prepare for dealing with my mother, because we all have those frequent callers, right, that have some issues. A specific caller followed me basically as I went from one 911 center to another one and back to another one. I dealt with her 2-3 times a week. And what happened was her mental health was preparing me to take care of my own mother. And I learned that. That's how I was able to basically diagnose my mother before it was done medically with the dementia. And I had 20 plus years of call taking, so I had the anger of my mother dealing with dementia, not being able to help her. I had the anger of the calls, giving CPR instructions to the parents of the lifeless infant, the domestic violence callers that, the calls that we feel so helpless for. After Mom passed in 2020, I was still dealing with some issues. I was in my basement trying to clean out, decluttering my mind, something I learned from Adam Tim, declutter your workspace, declutter your mind. I came across my original basic telecommunicator book in my basement from 1997, and right next to it was an old headset and a bowling ball. And the bowling ball was kind of face up where the holes were looking at it, and I saw the headset, and I kind of went, hey, it kind of looks like a face. And I said, I think I have a way to get rid of my anger now. What I do is I'll walk around with the bowling ball to get rid of the stress. Everybody asks me how much it weighs. I say it's a full 16-pound bowling ball. Well, why don't you just use one of the lighter ones? 35 years of EMS, field EMS, I don't need to be reminded what the weight of a human head is. So I make sure that the ball is heavier than the weight of a human head. Sure, my back gets sore, but people have gone through a lot worse than what I go through carrying around this bowling ball. But that's how I get my release. You never know where your help is going to come from in life. You never know how it's going to help you. It turns out that my job saved my life. I am 911.
So, it's we have our personal lives and then we have our professional lives, and sometimes they interfere with each other or they cross over. And Imagine Listening really helped me when I did it back in Baltimore in 2019, because I lost my brother to suicide, and I was having issues, and I was starting to get mad at suicidal callers, and I, management and us, luckily they sent me to EAP, and I, with after therapy and whatnot, and dealing with those issues, I was able to get back behind the console again in a happier place. And my story is that we work on the other side of the bay there, so we got a 911 call from a resident that lives on the other side of the bay there, that I just got a phone call from my son's friend, and he texted me a picture of my son, and he's on some sort of building or whatever in Atlantic City. So I sent our officer to her home so he could take a look at the picture and get as much information as possible. And I waited till the officer arrived before I disconnected from her. And then we find out later that one of the officers that responded to the house sent that image to an officer here in the city. And because good officers know their patrol areas, he recognized the building behind the gentleman and responded with other units, and they met on the top of a parking garage. And right before he was going to go over the edge, they grabbed him and pulled him back. So I'm just proud that I'm still working. I couldn't save my brother, but I saved that gentleman with the help of those officers, because it takes a team between us on the comm center and the police, fire, and EMS out in the field. I am 911.
"911, where's your emergency?" Father frantically yells, "My son is not breathing." Phone disconnects. Although you can't see it on my face or tell by my actions, but panic sets in. My heart beats rapidly. My breath becomes heavy. Adrenaline kicks in. I'm trying to call him back 3 times with no answer. I call a provider to ping the phone. It gives me a general location by a nearby motel. I send officers to head over there, telling them to knock on every door if need be. After what feels like an eternity, finally, Dad picks up my call. I get the room number, relay the info to officers, and give CPR instructions to a frantic, crying father. Officers get on scene, and it's too late. The words every first responder dreads to hear. His name was Elijah. He was 7 months old, and he died in his crib lying beside his twin brother. My sergeant assured me there was nothing I could have done. The baby died hours earlier. But after the adrenaline dissipates and your blood pressure regulates, you're still left there with the shock of it all. Ring, ring, ring. It's the next call. That's how it always ends. Thank you. I want to thank you all for being in here for the job that you do. Not many people can do the job that you do. Hard stories, yes. But it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to open up and share. It's hard to explain what it is like to be in this session with people who know exactly what it is that you're going through. The call to take, whether they be the hard ones or the saves. Thank you for the job that you do is the most vital piece of safety. A round of applause for those who have shared stories. Once again, I want to thank everyone who attended the Imagine Listening session. It was, it wasn't something that I had planned on doing right away. I had asked to be put on an alternate list, and it just happened to work out. And I was able to do the session, which I was extremely happy. And there were so many people that were in there and just sharing, their stories and just some powerful moments, all of it. It's not an easy job, and all of you who were in there, even if you didn't share a story, thank you for being in there and supporting those who did. And who knows, maybe listening will help you, share a story someday when you're ready. Because it's okay. It's okay to feel, and it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to share your stories. For a long time, it seemed like we weren't allowed to feel, but we're doing so now. And I thank you all so much for being there and for sharing. It means the world. And again, I hope that I get to go back, because it was an excellent experience, and to do Imagine Listening again would be great. So thank you all once again for everything. And if you have any comments, questions, or you ever want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter, that is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook, that is facebook.com/Within the Trenches Podcast. This episode has been sponsored by INdigital as well as Carbyne. Shout out to patrons as always. And if you want to become a patron and help support us, you can check us out, and that is patreon.com/WTT Podcast. This can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, as well as Twitter. And then you can also listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone. We'll see you in the next one.